What my nephew whispered over coffee that morning left me staring at the bottom of my mug like it held the answer to something much bigger than both of us. I wasn't prepared for what he said. No one would be. But what followed changed how I saw myself, him, and a few things I thought I had all figured out. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was one of those chilly March mornings that makes the light feel gray, no matter how high the sun is. I remember because I had to put on 2 pairs of socks just to make it from the bedroom to the kitchen without feeling like I was stepping across an Arctic plain. The house smelled like cinnamon from the candle I'd left burning too long the night before, and the old coffee pot was sputtering like it always did, right before the last drop. James was already there when I came downstairs. My nephew, 29, tall with that sort of quiet posture that always made me wonder what he was thinking. He'd come into town late the night before, said he had some time off from work, and thought he'd stop by and check in. I didn't think much of it at the time. We'd always been close in a way that surprised even our own family. I helped raise him after his mom, my sister, passed when he was 12. There's history between us, and not the kind that needs words to explain itself. He was sitting at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug with a faded apple design on it. The steam rose slow, curling into the air like it had secrets. He looked up when I came in, smiled in that way he does, just a half quirk of the mouth, and gestured to the chair across from him. "Mornin', Aunt Mel." "You're up early," I said, reaching for my mug and the last splash of coffee. "Couldn't sleep much. This old place has got its own soundtrack." I chuckled. "Tell me about it. These floorboards know all our sins." He didn't laugh right away, just sipped, watched me over the rim of that mug. There was something in his eyes that morning, like he packed a suitcase of thoughts he hadn't quite unpacked yet. The kind of look someone has when they've been driving for hours with the radio off, lost in themselves. We talked about small things at first, the weather, his job, the dog down the street that barks at anything with wheels. But there was a pause between sentences that kept tugging at the edges of the conversation, like something trying to slip in unnoticed. I didn't push. I knew better than that. Sometimes the heart needs to circle the runway a few times before it can land. And then, just as I was reaching for the sugar, he said it. "You ever feel like someone sees a version of you you didn't even know was there?" I stopped, hand hovering midair. "What do you mean?" He looked down at his coffee, as if whatever he was about to say had taken root in the bottom of that mug. Then softer, like you've spent so long being one thing for everyone else, you forgot there's something else under it. And then someone says something, or just looks at you, and suddenly you remember. There was something fragile in his voice, like he was holding a thread and afraid it might snap. I put the sugar down, sat back, the quiet stretched. "I think we all carry different versions of ourselves," I said. "Some of them never get to speak, but sometimes someone shows up who listens anyway." He met my eyes then, a long, searching kind of look, and he whispered, "That's what I think you've done for me." My breath caught, not in some dramatic soap opera way, but in that quiet, human way when someone says something that lands closer to your ribs than your ears. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. We just sat there. The ticking clock, the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower, the heat clicking on, it all kept the silence from feeling too heavy. I looked at him, really looked. Not the boy I helped raise, not the nephew who always remembered my birthday, not even the man who'd come to visit, but something else. someone standing at the edge of something important and maybe a little scared to step forward. That morning lingered longer than it had any right to. Not because of what he said exactly, but because of everything it opened up inside me. We finished our coffee, talked some more, but the air between us had shifted. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew, whatever it was, it had already started. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was April, one of those half-spring, half-winter days where the sun peeks out like it's not sure if it's welcome. The kind of morning that carries a hush with it, as though the world is waiting for something. I had just finished cleaning up breakfast when Jacob walked into the kitchen. My nephew had always been the quiet observer of the family. Never the loudest at dinner, never the first to jump in with an opinion. But when he did speak, he chose his words like someone who'd thought them through in advance. He was visiting for a few days after leaving his job in the city. Something about burnout, or maybe just a need to reset. I didn't press him for details. I figured if he wanted to talk, he'd talk. He looked older than I remembered. Not in a wrinkled or weary kind of way, but like life had asked him some hard questions recently, and he hadn't yet figured out the answers. His flannel shirt was buttoned wrong, one side lower than the other, and I wanted to fix it, but didn't. There are some things you have to let people do themselves. I poured him a cup of coffee, my kind, the dark roast that practically bites back, and slid it across the table. He wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into it for a moment like it might offer a map. "You ever notice," he said, "how quiet your house is?" I smiled. That's what happens when the kids move out and the dog gets too old to bark at everything. He laughed, but his eyes stayed thoughtful. It's a good quiet, peaceful. I nodded. Takes a while to appreciate that kind of quiet. Used to drive me crazy. We sipped in silence for a bit. The rain had started again, just a soft patter against the windows. The kind of rain that doesn't demand anything from you, just wants to be noticed. Then, almost without looking at me, Jacob said, "I think I've been pretending." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it landed between us like a pebble dropped in a still pond. "Pretending?" I asked gently. He nodded, staring into the swirl of cream in his coffee. "Yeah, pretending to be okay with things I'm not okay with. Pretending to be someone I'm not sure I ever was." I didn't know what to say at first. I wanted to say the right thing. Not rush it, not dismiss it. Just hold space for whatever he needed. "You don't have to pretend here," I said finally. "Whatever it is, I'm listening." He looked up then, really looked at me. And there was something raw in his expression that made me put down my cup and give him my full attention. "You always seemed like you figured things out," he said, "even when things were hard." I smiled, a little sad. "Oh, honey, I've faked more peace than I've ever actually had." But thank you for thinking that. That made him smile, just a little. A real one. Then came the whisper, the one I wasn't expecting. The one that made me tilt my head and wonder how many things I thought I knew that I really didn't. His voice was barely there, like he was afraid to hear it out loud himself. And even though I won't repeat it now, not because it's a secret, but because some words belong in the quiet of a kitchen with rain on the windows, I'll tell you this. It was honest. It was real. And it came from a place of such deep vulnerability that I felt honored to hear it. We didn't solve anything that morning. Life doesn't work that way. But something shifted. Between us. Within him. maybe even within me. And as we sat there, 2 mugs growing cold in our hands, I realized something I hadn't in a long time. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is say the truth out loud, even if it's only to one person, even if it's only whispered. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment like that, where someone opened up to you in a way that caught you off guard, but made you feel more connected than ever. I'd love to hear your story. And if you want to know what came next, just say the word. The rain had cleared by then. Morning sunlight stretched long and pale across the kitchen counters, dust dancing in the beams like tiny floating ghosts. I was at the sink, rinsing blueberries when Jacob came in. No words, just that soft, thoughtful presence. He poured himself some coffee, sat at the same chair as the day before, and offered me a quiet, almost tentative smile. It was clear he hadn't slept much. His eyes had that restless look, like he'd been circling thoughts all night, trying to land somewhere safe. He didn't need to say it. I knew that kind of night well. I've had dozens of them in my lifetime. You know, I said casually, most people only whisper big truths once. Then they pretend it never happened. He looked up, surprised. Then a slow, sheepish grin spread across his face. Yeah, he said. I almost did that. Pretend it didn't matter. Does it? I asked. He nodded, more certain now. Yeah, it does. We took our coffee to the porch. It was still damp out, the wood under our feet soft from the previous day's rain. Birds were out, busy with whatever birds do in the morning. Chatter, courtship, territory. Nature always has a rhythm, a logic. People, not so much. We sat in 2 creaky wicker chairs, side by side, looking out at my overgrown backyard. The hydrangeas were blooming too early, and the ivy had nearly swallowed the old stone wall at the back. I liked it that way, wild, untamed, honest. I think Jacob did too. I always thought I was supposed to be a certain way, he said after a while. Make people comfortable. Keep things easy. And now, I asked. Now I just want to be real, even if it makes things messy. That word, messy, sat between us like an invitation. I knew a thing or two about messy. I had spent years straightening things for everyone else. The birthday parties, the apologies that weren't mine to make, the sacrifices no one asked for but everyone silently expected. I had been the strong one for so long that I'd almost forgotten how to be anything else. You know, I said, there's a certain freedom in finally admitting you don't have it all figured out. He turned to me, his face soft with something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. Have you ever done that? He asked. Only once, I replied, and it changed everything. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. Some stories don't need to be told all at once. But he understood, and that was enough. Then, for the first time since he'd arrived, he asked me a question I hadn't expected. Aunt Sarah, he said slowly, what did you want your life to look like before it became what it is? It knocked the wind out of me a little. No one had ever asked me that. Not my ex-husband, not my children, not even my sister. I took a long breath, the kind you take before diving into something deeper than you'd planned. I said, I wanted to feel seen, not just needed, not just depended on, but seen for who I was. He nodded like he knew exactly what I meant. We sat there for a long time. No pressure to fill the silence. Just 2 people, different generations, but tangled in similar questions. And then He reached over and touched my hand, just for a second. Nothing dramatic, nothing that needed explaining. But in that small gesture, I felt more connection than I had in months. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real. I could feel something in both of us settling, unraveling and softening at the same time. That afternoon, we drove to the old lake where my parents used to take us when we were kids. We didn't say much in the car, just listened to some old music from my CD collection that still worked when it felt like cooperating. At the lake, we sat on the edge of the dock. Our feet dangled over the water, and the wind carried the scent of pine and damp leaves. Jacob skipped a stone and smiled when it bounced 4 times before disappearing. "Think we ever stop pretending?" he asked. I said, "we just get better at catching ourselves when we do." He looked at me with that same quiet intensity, then said, "I think I came here looking for space to be myself. I didn't realize I'd find you doing the same." That night, we had soup and grilled cheese and watched the kind of movie that doesn't need too much thinking. We didn't talk about anything deep. We just let the weight of the day ease off our shoulders. But as I watched him laughing at something ridiculous on the screen, I realized something else. I wasn't just helping him come home to himself. I was starting to do the same. And that, dear listener, was the beginning of something I hadn't expected. Not a dramatic transformation, not a crisis, just a quiet return to truth. One whisper, one cup of coffee, one shared silence at a time. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a conversation that helped you come back to yourself. I'd love to hear about it. And when you're ready, I'll tell you what happened next. Just say the word. The 3rd day started slow. The kind of slow that doesn't beg for attention, just asks you to notice. Jacob was already awake when I came into the kitchen. He was staring out the window, the same mug of coffee in his hands, still dressed in the t-shirt he'd worn the night before. The backyard was glowing in soft gold, dew still clinging to the grass. "Morning," I said, careful not to startle whatever thoughts were moving through him. He nodded. Didn't sleep much. "You want to talk about it?" He didn't answer right away, just watched a squirrel dart up the maple tree like it had somewhere important to be. Then he said, "I keep thinking about what you said, about wanting to be seen." I leaned against the counter, letting my body rest in the familiarity of that spot. It took me a long time to even admit that out loud. "I think I've been waiting for someone to give me permission," he said. "To stop pretending. To just be who I am." I poured myself a cup and joined him at the window. The air between us felt heavier than before, but not in a bad way. It was thick with reflection, with memory. He turned toward me, and this time his voice was stronger. Still gentle, but steadier. "I'm not who I thought I'd be," he said. "And not who they wanted me to be either." "Who's they?" I asked, though I already had a good guess. "My parents, friends, people from school. Everyone, really. I learned early on that being quiet meant being safe." I exhaled slowly. "That's a lonely way to live." "Yeah," he said. "It is." He sat down at the table, and I followed. The same chairs we'd sat in days before. Same table, same sunlit kitchen. But everything felt different now. "You know," I told him, "I used to sit in this house at night, after the kids were asleep, and just stare at the walls, wondering how I'd ended up so far from myself. It's not always a loud crisis. Sometimes it's a slow drifting." Jacob looked at me then, really looked. "How did you find your way back?" I smiled, but there was a sadness in it. I started listening to the parts of me I'd ignored, the parts that didn't want to smile politely through everything, the part that wanted to cry, or say no, or start over. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's what I want, to start over." The weight of those words hung in the room. Starting over, it's such a beautiful idea, and such a terrifying one. Whether you're 26 or 56, that leap feels just as steep. That afternoon, we took a walk through the neighborhood. The sun had come out fully, and the streets smelled like warm pavement and someone's barbecue drifting from 2 blocks away. Jacob walked slowly, hands in his pockets, eyes on the cracks in the sidewalk. "I used to think life was a straight line," he said. "Go to school, get the job, settle down, figure it all out by 30. I laughed. That's a lie we all bought into. Life's more like a patchwork quilt, stitched together from all the things you never planned. We passed the park where I used to take my kids. The swing squeaked the same way they did 20 years ago. I watched Jacob as he looked around, like he was seeing everything for the first time. You were always the aunt I felt safe with," he said softly, "even when I was little." "I didn't know that," I replied. He looked surprised. "Really? I just tried to be present. That's all." "You were more than that," he said. "You were you, and that made it okay for me to be me, even if I didn't know who that was yet." It hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so much of my life doubting if I mattered beyond the roles I played. Mother, sister, ex-wife, caretaker. But hearing that simply being me had meant something, that was a gift. That evening, we sat on the porch again, wrapped in light jackets as the breeze cooled. The sky turned peach, then lavender, then that deep blue that always feels like a secret. "I've been thinking about moving," he said quietly. "Somewhere quieter, smaller. More? Me?" I looked at him, surprised but not. "You thought it through." He nodded. "Not everything, but enough to know I can't keep living a life that doesn't fit." I reached over, rested my hand over his. "Then do it. You don't need permission, Jacob. Just courage. And I think you've got more of that than you know." He smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that comes from somewhere deeper. That night, after he went to bed, I stayed up alone in the kitchen. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft ticking of the wall clock. I poured one last cup of coffee, even though I wouldn't drink it. I just needed the comfort of the ritual. And I thought about how strange and wonderful it is, the way we can find ourselves reflected in someone else's journey. How healing can happen in unexpected places, like a kitchen table, or a shared walk, or a whisper over coffee. Let me know in the comments, have you ever started over? Or stood beside someone while they did? I'd love to hear what that looked like for you. And if you're ready, I'll share what came next, the final part of this story, and how it changed both of us in ways we never expected. Just say the word. The morning Jacob left, the house was still. The kind of stillness that's not empty, just waiting. The birds were louder than usual, like they knew something was shifting. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, coffee in hand, watching him load his suitcase into the trunk of his old sedan. He looked lighter somehow, not fixed, but freer. We didn't say much at first. Some moments don't need many words. "You sure you've got everything?" I asked. He smiled, even took the coffee mug. I laughed. It was an old chipped one with a faded mountain scene on the side. I always thought it was ugly, but he loved it. Well, I said, take good care of it. That mug's been through more conversations than most people. He shut the trunk, then leaned against the car and looked at me. Really looked. You've given me more than a place to stay, he said. You gave me space to tell the truth. I felt my throat tighten. That's what family's for. At least it should be. He nodded, then hesitated. I don't know where I'll land exactly. I just know it won't be where I've been. That's enough, I said. You don't have to know the whole map, just the next step. We hugged. A long, quiet, bone-deep kind of hug. And when he pulled away, there were tears in both our eyes, but neither of us wiped them away. As he drove off, I didn't go back inside right away. I stood there a while, arms around myself, breathing in the crisp September air. The sky was high and pale, the kind that makes you feel small but safe at the same time. And I realized something. Jacob had come to find himself, but in doing so, he had reminded me of parts I'd let go quiet. That afternoon, I found an old box in the attic. Letters I'd written but never sent. Photographs from before everything got so complicated. Even a small, yellowed notebook with the words, "Things I Still Want," scribbled on the front. It stopped me cold. I couldn't remember writing it. Inside were only a few lines. A house with quiet mornings. A place where laughter feels easy. Someone who listens without fixing. Time to paint again. Time to walk barefoot in the grass. Time to be me. And I sat there on the dusty attic floor, smiling through tears because, without realizing it, I'd started living those things. Not all of them. Not perfectly. But enough. Later that week, I rearranged the furniture in the guest room. Not out of sadness, but because I wanted the space to reflect what it had become, a room where truth was spoken, not hidden, where masks were left at the door. I opened the window, let the light pour in, and added a plant in the corner. One of those hard-to-kill ones, but still full of life. A few days after Jacob left, he sent a photo. A small rental cabin near the coast. Weathered wood. Big windows, surrounded by trees. Just the kind of place I could imagine him growing roots. His message said, not the final stop. But it feels right for now. Thank you, Aunt Sarah, for everything. I stared at that message longer than I care to admit, and when I finally put the phone down, I whispered something to the quiet room. Thank you, Jacob, for showing up, for being honest, for reminding me it's not too late. Because it's not. Not too late to listen. Not too late to speak. Not too late to forgive yourself for drifting. And certainly not too late to start again, however slowly, however softly. So if you're watching this and wondering if anyone sees you, let me say this. I may not know your name or your full story, but I know this much. We are all out here trying to find our way back to ourselves, one truth at a time, one conversation at a time, one quiet whisper over coffee. Let me know in the comments, what's your next small step? I'd truly love to hear. And until the next story, take care of yourself. And remember, the smallest truths often open the biggest doors.